Welcome to WGVU Public Media's Decision 2020. In this online forum, we introduce you to the Michigan Supreme Court Justice candidates. This is an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the judicial candidates. We're recording these interviews via Zoom from the studios of the Meijer Public Broadcast Center at Grand Valley State University. Today's recording is in association with the Grand Rapids Bar Association. It generated the 5 questions we'll be asking the candidates. Joining us now is Elizabeth Welch from Grand Rapids.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick, for having me. And thank you to the Grand Rapids Bar Association and WGVU for hosting this important forum. Grand Rapids is my hometown, so I'm really thrilled to be part of this. I am running because I really believe my frontline lens on the justice system will be really valuable to the court. I've spent 25 years in the trenches working with small businesses, nonprofits, and individuals on employment law matters. That has to do with wage and hour issues all the way to workplace safety, which means COVID has taken up a lot of my time this election cycle. I launched this campaign in December and of course never dreamed that I would be spending quite as much time becoming an expert on public health and what are best practices for the workplace, but alas, here we are. And I do think that actually will be a skill set that will be valuable if elected. I also have spent a lot of time in the space of public school advocacy, voter protection, and environmental conservation issues. All of those involve a lot of bipartisan hard work in Lansing and with others to work on really complex systems. And we are at a moment in time where we are looking at our court system as a whole and talking more about how can we make it work better. And I firmly believe that is a skill set that I could bring to the table as we tackle those tough issues.
Could you please tell us why you feel you should be reelected to the Michigan Supreme Court?
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick, for having me and for the opportunity to talk about these important issues. I have had the privilege of spending the last 25 years representing folks mostly in West Michigan and Grand Rapids who are small business owners, nonprofits, and individuals on employment law matters. I indeed have become an expert on COVID compliance, just like everybody has, but I have a sharp lens on the workplace and worker safety and making sure that we operate in our area in a safe way. And I've had the privilege of helping my clients navigate this public health crisis. I also have spent a lot of time in the space of working on public school advocacy all over the state, working with many folks in a bipartisan way, fighting for our public education system, as well as voting rights and conservation issues. Those are complex issues that need talented problem solvers. And I really feel those are the same kinds of problems that are facing our court system. And I'd love to bring that skill set to the table.
The Michigan Supreme Court is responsible for the general administrative supervision of all courts in Michigan. Where do you see our courts in need of improvement, and how would you address that?
Thank you so much for that really important question. We are at a moment where we're having a reckoning on what our court system looks like on both the criminal side and the civil side being anything that isn't criminal, which is where a lot of people also touch the court system. I want to touch first upon access to justice and the fact that 80% of people can't afford a lawyer or can't find a lawyer or don't even know how to access the court system. I graduated from law school 25 years ago. The conversation around this hasn't changed at all. And in fact, it's only become more elevated. We have more people now than ever who can't get access to proper counsel to help them navigate the system. It's really time we reinvent on this issue. We can do that. We've got the ability to use technology. We have the ability to scale programs. There's great work happening in different silos around our state. In our own backyard, we have something called the Legal Assistance Center, which members of the Grand Rapids Bar, in fact, led on. I had the privilege of having started my practice years ago at Miller Johnson, and there were several attorneys who were leading on this important work of helping people navigate the court system who did not have access to an attorney. These are folks who they're not going to be able to afford a lawyer. They probably are never going to be able to afford an attorney, and we've got to figure out how to help them. We've got to make it easier for these folks to come into the courthouse and know where to go. There are great ideas happening in, as I said, our own backyard has a great idea, but there's also great ideas happening all over the country. And there are efforts right now underway that have just begun in our Michigan court system through the leadership of some on the Supreme Court, to really make Michigan a leader on access to justice issues. We need to keep trying new ideas. We need to be innovative, and we need to be nimble. If something works, we need to scale it. And that's what's hard. We have a decentralized court system, much like our public school system. That doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying and moving the needle on really important changes. And I would be thrilled to help with that work.
The killings of George Floyd and other minorities and the seemingly disparate treatment of persons of color in our system of justice raise the question of whether justice is truly blind. How do you propose to fortify the public's trust in the judiciary?
Great. Thank you so much for that really important question at this moment in time. This has probably been one of the biggest changes anybody running for any judicial seat has had really in this campaign cycle. We as candidates are talking directly about the issue of what has happened in our court system, the issue of race and its impact on all systems in our country. And so these are really big, important issues. And I think it is very important that people electing judges pay attention to the candidates and whether they are talking about this issue, because it's really important. Now, the justice system obviously has to tackle tough issues every day, but it should be doing so in a very fair way. There are really critical places that the system can improve and work better. One of the places I feel really strongly that we could start tackling issues and ensuring more fairness in our system is through better use of data. And I know we're going to talk a little more about the courts, some of the studies that have come out and the impacts on the courts. But for me, accessing data and doing everything we can to have transparent, accessible data on outcomes in our system, and having those outcomes be very clear based on all demographics, where you live, your race, your gender, your age, your sentencing. I think it's really important we start there. That, I think, would go a long way towards helping ensure a more fair justice system and making sure people feel the system has integrity. When the system is viewed as unfair by a huge portion of the population, that's a threat to our democracy. The court system only works if people believe in it. It's our third branch of government. We need to make sure it is viewed as fair and impartial.
The State Joint Task Force on Jail and Pretrial Incarceration reported in January of this year that crime in Michigan is at a 50-year low, and yet the number of people incarcerated in county jails has tripled since the 1970s. That same study showed that black men made up 29% of jail admissions, while making up only 6% of the state's population. What role do you see Michigan courts playing in criminal justice reform?
As I noted in my prior, one of my prior responses, I feel the courts have a critical role to play in ensuring our systems of government, and that of course includes the criminal justice system, are functioning fairly and impartially. And obviously some of the data that came out from that report is distressing. I think for those of us who have practiced criminal law in the past, which I have done that a bit in my past, nobody is really surprised by it. I think folks sort of anecdotally knew what was going on. Particularly, a lot of that data shows people are sitting in jails for very minor offenses, often related to suspended driver's licenses. So there's been some important legislative work happening that is separate from the judicial branch. But the judicial branch definitely has an important role to play. And again, as I said before, I believe that judges have to be elected who care a lot about this issue. I believe especially people sitting on the Supreme Court can really use that platform to take a lead role in making sure the system functions more fairly. I already talked about the need to gather data. The pretrial incarceration task force indeed did gather some data, and that is fantastic, but that work should not stop. That should just be a start, and that is one element of data. We need a lot more data, and it needs to be easily accessible. We have 83 counties in the state, all different court systems throughout the state, and everybody is on different platforms, often antiquated and budget constrained. We need to figure that out. It's time with technology that we streamline the gathering of data so that we can make smart, informed decisions. I think a lot, if there were a clear lens on if you're convicted of one thing in Grand Traverse County and a different thing in Wayne County, and you have a clear lens on what does that look like as far as the outcomes, that would help a lot. I think we have an opportunity to make our courts be problem solvers and actually help make our communities better places.
Michigan's trial courts are overwhelmed with cases and parties representing themselves because they cannot afford counsel. And there is a perception held by many that justice favors the wealthy. As the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. What would you do as a justice on the Supreme Court to address these issues?
Great. This is a really important question. And just like we are looking at our criminal justice system and how it works, we also have this crisis in the civil justice system involving non-criminal matters. So you have landlord-tenant, divorce, probate, anything to do with family law, a contract dispute with your neighbor. Those are all issues that the court has to deal with, and frequently judges find in front of them people who don't have attorneys, or even worse, people who have a problem and they don't even go to court because they don't have an ability to access lawyers or the system. They don't even know where to begin. And we have legal aid, which is doing a fantastic job. We can be really proud of the work they do, but the reality is there just aren't enough legal aid attorneys to handle the demand of people who need assistance in our society. This is a nationwide problem. It is not unique to Michigan, but it's one that each state has to figure out. Our Supreme Court has an Access to Justice task force. They are hard at work on this, and there's a goal that within 3 years, we will be a leader on this issue. There's some important places they've started. They have started online dispute resolution to help parties with more simple disputes resolve them early. They can use technology and then bring in an actual community mediator to help folks solve their problems. That's a start. That obviously helps people early on resolve a problem before it gets bigger and takes up more time in the court system. A lot of problems are small. They're not small to the parties themselves, but in the scheme of the court system, they're smaller and they can be resolved with outside help. So that's an important first step. There's also the idea of, they call them sandbox proposals, but essentially beta testing, trying out different ideas to figure out how can we help non-represented parties navigate the system. The idea of courthouse navigators and different folks who have the skills to help. Other states are doing this, and I'm excited and hopeful that I could join the court and help Michigan navigate this as well.
Elizabeth Welch, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your work on this.
From all of us here at WGVU Public Media, we thank you for logging on, and please get out and vote Tuesday, November 3rd.